For the first time in a century of Canadian womanhood, a royal commission has been established to examine the status of the Canadian woman.
I think we've gone about as far as we can go in accepting all this discrimination, in hoping that it might be changed, and nothing has come of it. And this is why our insistence of this group on a commission on the status of women.
Why a royal commission on the status of women? Don't women have a pretty good status in Canada now, Mrs. Bird?
The Royal Commission on the Status of Women was a real cornerstone for Canadian women to realize what their situation was and what they needed to do to change it.
Each woman must find her place, not be put in her place.
Women's rights.
That Indian woman has been the workhorse, the doormat, and the baby machine.
And God knows I'm not one of those fanatic feminists, but I mean, there are things that we have to recognize that are not what it should be.
When the hearings have been completed, and we have heard from the public, we will base our recommendations on the information we have received in these ways.
Basically, the question is very simple. What do women want? Are they getting what they want? And do they really want what they want? I'm Gordon Donaldson, and I don't know the answer any more than you do, but tonight we will study the question.
Welcome to the second Pan-Canadian Young Feminist Gathering. Notre révolution féministe, our revolution is now. It's incredibly exciting to see all of you here. There's some of us that have been learning about feminism, growing our feminism, and who have identified as feminists for a long time. And again, some of us are brand spanking new to feminism. So I just want to introduce you to our amazing giant team of volunteers that have put this weekend on for you, for us, for our movement, for all young women that are out there.
43 years after the Royal Commission on the Status of Women, young women from across the country have gathered here in Winnipeg to once again voice their concerns and demand change.
Rise. 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 Rise.
There is a war on women going on right now. There is a war on feminism. That war is happening right here in Winnipeg. It's happening here in Canada, in Quebec. It's happening everywhere around the world. Right now, with the Conservative government, dozens of organizations closed their doors. 12 out of the 16 regional Status of Women Canada offices had to shut down. They were closed by the federal government. We see that this government will stop at nothing to shut us up.
The laws that we fought for and won are no longer guaranteed. In Canada, we're seeing things go backwards.
We will be post-feminist when we have post-patriarchy. Rise, rebels, rise. Rise, rebels, rise. Our struggle is not over. Rise. Rise. Rise.
Well, goodness, you've now been in the 4 capitals of all the Atlantic provinces with your friends, the Royal Commissioners on the Status of Women, Ed. Can you summarize how that session went?
Well, they heard 23 briefs, not all that many considering there were 4 provinces, and we heard very little about abortion and birth control.
Does this suggest then that the Maritimes are more conservative?
I know that the one brief that dealt with abortion was strongly against legalizing it.
This publicity has taken the form, really, of an active promotion of the point of view of those who favor abortion.
Is it a gross injustice to a woman to insist that she bear a child which results from violence such as rape?
I don't see how we could permit her to have that choice, to choose whether or not someone should live or die.
We live in a province that's kind of stuck in time.
There's all these restrictions. Yes, you have the right to your own body, but we'll tell you how and who and when.
I think it's important, my body, my choice. I get to choose what I do with my body. And I think if we lose that right, we lose a lot of rights in a lot of things.
There's so many ways in which the right-wing agenda and the religious dogma that's the driver behind it all are shaping the future of young women in this country.
They're Canadian women. They're no different than Canadian women across the country, yet they have to pay from their own pocket for something that other women don't.
By the time they're actually here for the procedure, they're kind of broken, just because of what it's taken for them to even get to Fredericton.
Come on in here. Hi. Just follow me this way.
I think in New Brunswick, I think women's lives have always been at risk when it comes to abortion.
Did you have a long drive?
Yeah, it's pretty long. Cool.
Good morning. Come on in. How you doing?
Morgentaler Clinic, can I
Good.
help
What's
you?
your name?
All right. What's your first name?
I'll give you your number, and then you'll be in for your ultrasound.
Okay.
Okay, so it
Perfect.
shouldn't be too long.
Okay. Now, you don't have any insurance coverage, do you, with anybody? Okay. Would you want to claim this on your income tax?
Sure.
I mean, you're paying for something you shouldn't have to pay for. It's a legitimate medical expense.
Okay.
So I would just have to write on what it's for in the doctor's name, because
The situation in New Brunswick is different than anywhere else in Canada.
So that's all I need.
In order for a woman to have an abortion, which is paid for by Medicare, she has to be referred by 2 doctors. It has to be done in a hospital, and that it has to be done by a gynecologist. There are many, many women in New Brunswick that do not have a family doctor, or that have family doctors that are anti-choice. So immediately they are restricted from having a Medicare paid for abortion in one of the 2 hospitals. Technically, the province is violating the Canada Health Act that says women ought to have equal access to abortion. This is the only other option for women in New Brunswick, and they have to pay.
It was a pretty big shocker. We've had our kids, we're married, we've been together forever, and it just wasn't what we expected. With my family doctor, he's great, but I don't have that relationship with him where I feel comfortable talking about my body or my sexual health. I also know friends that have gone through the hospital system, and the labeling that you get and the hoops that you have to go through. I preferred to come here where it wasn't something to be ashamed of, and that I knew that I would be in a safe, secure place and be able to feel comfortable with my decision.
Should all be here. All these barriers are harder on younger women, poorer women, and women who are more marginalized and without resources, because $600 for some women is no problem, but for others it's an impossibility.
I wasn't in a position to have a child. I couldn't even afford the pregnancy test. So I had actually gone to Moncton to go to the hospital, and then there would have been no cost. It would have been covered. And it was really scary. I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but then I think a lot of the time the people that I was dealing with in the hospital would put some doubt in me, and it was this big, like, what if you make a mistake, or what if it's harder to deal with getting an abortion than not getting an abortion. The relationship I was in was abusive on both sides, and there was a lot of drug use and issues with alcohol. So basically I knew that, I mean, I couldn't even take care of myself at that point. I really couldn't take care of myself. And how was I supposed to take care of a child, you know? I remember her asking me if I had permission or if he had sort of, my partner, consented to this. And I remember thinking, you know, I'm in Moncton, he's not here. When I got the test, he wasn't there. Like, what do I need his consent for, you know? Like, I'm here, that's my body, I'm giving you my consent. I remember being with the technician and they had to do an ultrasound. I remember her asking me, well, do you want to see the baby? And she just sort of tilted the screen. And I just remember thinking, like, of course it tugs on my emotions a little bit, but my decision I've made, I knew I was making the right decision. It sort of seemed like that my decision wasn't respected. Maybe there was a little bit of room for me to change my mind.
What have we got? Life. What do we want? Life. What's a baby need? Life. What do we want for every child? Life. Amen. This year we have something really wonderful to celebrate, and that is that the number of abortions in our hospitals of New Brunswick has gone down substantially in the last year compared to the previous year. 117 less abortions last year. So
there's a connection of people who are not supportive of abortion rights, and those are the same people who tend to have the loudest voices in the community.
No matter what other arguments we put forward, the root cause is selfishness and sin.
Now there's a whole new force that we're up against in the form of religious fundamentalism and the religious right. Along with the anti-abortion side of it, there's also an anti-birth control, abstinence-only sort of mindset. So instead of equipping young people to make healthy decisions around their bodies, they're just shutting it down, shutting down all discussion, all access to resources, all information.
Our local committee has been very active in putting pressure on hospital officials when we tell them to close this abortion clinic.
I absolutely think that the barriers for access to abortion put women's lives at risk. Every extra step a woman has to take, it becomes that more inviting for her to just do it herself, or to seek out somebody closer and cheaper who might not necessarily be licensed.
Women have always been dying, trying to get abortions, and I think women still are. We all need to be very, very cautious. Rights that have been hard won could be easily diminished, if not lost.
Vancouver Women's Caucus is leaving today on this abortion cavalcade and is joining with women all across Canada in a nationwide struggle to remove abortion from the criminal code and to make free abortions available to every woman on demand.
Women fighting together, working together is the only way that we're going to be able to change this law.
The abortion cavalcade left Vancouver with 5 cars filled with women who wanted to talk to other women and wanted to build a momentum across Canada. So we'd have women come forward telling us horrendous stories about their backroom abortions, and young women were being forced to have children they didn't want because of rapes, incest, the fact that they'd been sterilized without their knowing it or against their will.
We demand that women have the right to control their own bodies.
Women had no place to go that was legal and safe.
We will go ahead from here and we will speak for the women of Canada, and we will do further actions until each woman has her right to control her own life.
It was tremendously empowering for women across the country to see that they could organize. If they really got out and confronted politicians at all levels of government, that they could change things.
The women of Canada answer with fire.
the blood of their sisters.
It was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Times were changing because we were taking our lives in our own hands and speaking out.
Sisters murdered by abortion laws. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on.
Get the abortion law changed and we can look after the rest. Taking abortion out of the criminal code is a high priority.
The women of this country are moving forward and are going to win our equality and win our rights, and no one is going to stop us.
We believe that this is a fight between good and evil.
We are not going to put up with this harassment.
From 1968, I have performed 5,000 abortions in my clinic in Montreal in defiance of the abortion law, which I consider to be unjust, unfair, restrictive.
There was a big movement around Dr. Morgentaler. His clinic was raided a few times. He was arrested. He went to jail.
We're going to stay here as long as we can to try and reduce the number of abortions, to try and put Dr. Morgentaler out of business.
You must get in the street, you must stay in the street, and if they tell you you're not ready, you just say, ready or not, here we come. Thank you very much.
Morgentaler was threatened on many occasions. The clinics were attacked, the women defending the clinics were attacked, both at the clinics and in their homes. Doctors have been shot at and doctors have been killed.
I don't think it was just Dr. Morgentaler that moved everything forward in Canada. It was grassroots women's groups.
Good evening. A historic decision on abortion today, a judgment that will have a profound impact all across the country.
Outside Dr. Morgentaler's clinic in Toronto, his supporters were overjoyed at news of the Supreme Court's decision.
It's been a long struggle, and we knew we could win, and we've won it, and we're going to keep this victory forever for the women.
The women's movement changed those laws. In the US with Roe v. Wade and in Canada with the Morgentaler decision. That was a work of feminism, like a measurable thing that feminism did. It was a mistake to think that once the Morgentaler decision happened that this fight was over, because it's not going to be won that easily.
There is a cloud of unholy silence that hangs over this abortuary like a dark cloud. The cry of innocence betrayed.
Once the clinic was built, the anti-choice people bought a house directly next door to the clinic that was already there. So that's the base of their operations in Fredericton.
To live our faith.
Most pro-lifers are in this because we believe that that's a child, that's a human being. Since my eyes were open to this issue 5 years ago, I see everything differently now. I see everything differently, and I just see men being so irresponsible. Part of that is that feminists have said, we don't need you anymore. We don't want you to be men. We don't want you to hold us up as women. It's not choice for women, it's no choice.
I never want to underestimate what can happen here, because we live in little sleepy old Fredericton, that something horrible couldn't happen. I don't think it would be from our neighbors next door, from the Right to Life people. I think they incite violence in other people, and I think that's what happens when doctors get hurt.
There are still threats of violence against clinics. There are still threats of violence against physicians. I'm actually very proud of what I do, but for my own safety, I just have to be cautious because unfortunately some people out there, just because of what I do, would want to harm me.
You know, our own doctor got kicked out of her practice and no other doctors would come to her defense. And there's a lot of doctors here, strong women doctors that are pro-choice. But they're strong women doctors and pro-choice among themselves and not publicly, because publicly it's going to affect them.
I think this myth that the anti-choice people care about life needs to be deconstructed, because what they care about really is family values, pushing women back into the family, taking away the advances that women have made and the rights that women have accomplished. Their pro-life position has to be situated within their larger political project, which really is an anti-woman project.
We saw them when we were driving in, and they have these big obnoxious signs, and the first thing I think that I noticed was that there were more men out that day than there were women, which really struck me funny. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw two of them. They just start yelling at you, and half the things you can hear and half of the things just sound like noise in the background. But this one woman was just leaning against the railing. She looked at me and said, "You're killing your baby. Why are you killing your baby?" Even though I was sure, and even though I knew that it was my choice, and even though I knew that I was doing it for the right reasons for me, she thought that, you know, she had the right, for whatever reason, to tell me I was a murderer. And that was brutal. It really was.
Women come here and they want to tell me why they're having an abortion. And I say, look, you don't have to tell me why. And there's women who come and see me and they cry and they start sobbing and they say, I just don't want to have children.
It just feels I feel guilty a little bit, you know what I mean?
All right, but you guys have talked about it together.
Oh, yes, yes.
I said, you know what? It's okay. We're not all made to be mothers, right? It's okay. And she just like sobbed. Just sobbed, crying. I mean, she was crying in my office for like half an hour. I couldn't stop her. It was like for the first time, she had permission to feel okay about a decision that she was making. That we gave her permission to feel okay about a decision. What have we done to women? I don't really know. It scares me. We've done bad things to women, I think. The fact that New Brunswick has been kind of allowed to get away with restricting abortion rights for women is almost setting a bit of a precedent in a backwards direction for the rest of Canada.
Mr. Hoback. Ms. Hepner. Ms. Hepner. Mr. Lobb. Mr. Lobb. Mr. McColeman. Mr. McColeman. Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne. Mr. Upal. Mr. Upal. Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards. Mr. Weston St. John. Mr. Weston St. John. Mr. Woodworth. Mr. Woodworth. Mr. Young. Mr. Young. Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller. Mr. Preston. Mr. Preston. Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith. Mr. Trost. Mr. Trost.
It's a big shock to a lot of people that this is still an issue.
Mr. Albrecht.
A lot of women are actually finding their way to the movement, and specifically to the abortion rights movement, through having gone through an absolutely awful experience of trying to get an abortion.
We're gonna go and bring them our fire! Bring them the fire of the rebellion!
The rebels movement is a very uncharacteristically fresh thing to be happening in Canadian feminism.
Right wing! Right wing!
We're in this because we believe in beautiful feminist values like solidarity, equality, freedom, justice, peace. Il n'y avait plus cette espèce de mouvement, de réseau pan-canadien qui nous permettait de réfléchir ensemble, de partager sur qu'est-ce qui se passe au plan local, les attaques qu'on essuie, les reculs qu'on essuie. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? On s'organise, on en crée un autre, puis on va emmener des luttes, puis on va gagner. We have to think long-term, women. Our abortion right is under attack. Our right to choose what to do with our body is under attack. This is unacceptable.
There's no way to solve the abortion problem without changing entirely how we look at women as a society, because abortion is not going away. Unwanted pregnancies are not going away. What needs to go away is a certain attitude about women. That's where that fight needs to be fought.
Like as soon as I decided, like when I told my friends I decided to have an abortion, they were like, oh, you should talk to my friend so-and-so. Oh, it was like the biggest secret club opened up to me, and all of a sudden everyone I know knows someone or is someone who's had an abortion. It was like, why are we silent?
I had to coerce him into giving me the birth control by saying that I was using it so that I wouldn't get cramps anymore. And then it was okay.
People trying to control at what time you should have a baby instead of like just seeing it as a choice, general choice of a woman's over her body.
Until we can control our own bodies, there's no other place in the world that we can be equal if we can't even have that say over our own bodies. What are some things that you want the movement to be for you? Because we're here like talking as young women about a movement that we're running for ourselves. So that's why I wanted this workshop to be reproductive justice focused. So not just pro-choice.
We kind of do need to move past the whole anti-choice, pro-choice, because it's restricting us to constantly be on the defense. It limits us in the end.
Pro-choice has a very specific connotation of second-wave women fighting for abortion access and legality. There's a big difference between changing the law and changing the way we view women's bodies and the way that society works. For a lot of people, the important and pressing concern is not where can I get an abortion covered by Medicare. It's how am I going to feed my kids? It's how am I going to get out of this abusive relationship? How am I going to stop the government forcibly sterilizing my community? So, you know, when I say choice, it means a certain thing to me that it might not necessarily mean to someone who has a lot less privilege. So reproductive justice is a more holistic way of looking at sexual choice and about controlling our bodies.
Reproduction cannot be separated from the socioeconomic status of women. What about the women who would choose to have children and who would choose to keep them? They also have to be taken into account. Many resort to abortion because they can't actually do that. We as a society do not actually provide adequate services and support to women. So abortion becomes a huge woman's issue, right? Because she's the one who will be made responsible for bearing the child, for having the child, and for raising the child in a society where she herself is fundamentally unequal. It's only when everything else has been exhausted that abortion becomes an option for women. It really is a place of no choice.